Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the McLaren's Pub Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Jansen, and today we have some extra special guests today. Boys, introduce yourselves.
Hey, I'm Zach.
I'm Ben.
I'm Dennis.
And I'm Thomas.
Today we'll be analyzing Escape from Spiderhead, written by George Sanders. Thomas will summarize the story after a short word from our sponsors. Boys, do you have unwanted body hair? Well, if so, Manscaped is the product for you. Manscaped, nick-free, cut-through blades provide a smooth, clean trim without hurting your prized possessions. Don't like Manscaped? Return your trimmer within 30 days and get your money back guaranteed. No questions asked. Save 10% off when you use promo code PUB10. That is PUBTEN for 10% off. Thomas, take it away.
So essentially, Escape from Spiderhead follows some convicts that are promised reduced sentences by doing voluntary drug trials in a lab. The control center of this lab is called the Spiderhead, and it's run by a person named Abnesti, who's the lead scientist. Nobody in the lab knows about each other's pasts, and the story kind of starts off following the main character, Jeff, when he is drugged into
Wait. Are we actually allowed to say?
No, of course we're not. I'm going to censor it.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so Jeff had intercourse with two women named Heather and Rachel, and he had a feeling of love with each of them for a short period of time while on these drugs. And to test if Jeff is still in love with the woman afterwards, they are brought into a viewing room while he's in the Spiderhead, watching them, essentially like a interrogation room. And he is asked which one of them he wants to give a drug called Darkenflox, which would induce immense pain. Jeff decides that neither woman is more important than the other, and he wouldn't want to drug either of them or any person with Darkenflox, so he's able to leave. Later, Corporate was not as satisfied with the results as Abnesti was, so they forced Jeff to watch as Heather's drugged with the Darkenflox, and though this wasn't the intent, it leads to her killing herself to escape the pain of the drug. And during all this, Jeff was made to describe his feelings. Rachel is then brought in later, and before she can be killed, Jeff decides to give himself the Darkenflox and die. So essentially, that's the story. What did you guys think of it?
Overall, I thought it was a really good story. It was nice. It was decently short, so it wasn't a pain to read. Definitely something very different compared to what we've been reading so far. So, like, a lot of the stuff we've done has been true stories. Not a lot of, especially science fiction. It's such a deep, or such a big change from what we've been reading so far. But the part that kind of struck me the most was, one, they decided to torture this girl for 5 minutes and not stop. And then after that, they also decided to go ahead and try it again because they weren't satisfied with that.
Exactly,
But
yeah.
overall, definitely a really good story, and would definitely recommend other people to read it.
Yeah, good points. Anyone else?
When I started reading it, oh, you want to go?
Oh, no, you go ahead. I'm
Okay.
You're the guest.
I am the guest. When I started reading it, I was questioning whether I was reading the right article or not, because that took a turn in there halfway through, and I was like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Like,
You get about 2 paragraphs in, you're like, oh, we are not reading a high school story. Absolutely
yeah,
not.
that was.
No.
I was like, I'm just gonna check to make sure this is the right article.
Yeah, I totally felt the same way about the story. I thought it was very different, and the way I looked at it is that they thought they were getting an easier sentence, but they unwillingly and unknowingly signed up for a death sentence, basically, as it seemed like Amnesty was just gonna kill them anyways with the Darkenflox.
Yeah, I think that's true, but also it definitely wasn't their intent to kill with the Darkenflox. It was just trying to analyze the behavior of the person watching to see if they had any residual romantic feelings for that person. But yeah, I can kind of see how the drug trials, I guess they signed forms for this in the story. They don't really go into depth about the backstory, but yeah, they definitely died during the trials, and that's, I think, is a lot worse than having a longer sentence.
Yeah, exactly. Darkenflox wasn't really a tested drug, they said. Like, the longest they've gone with it was 5 minutes, and that was Heather when she killed herself with it. So it's kind of an unknown drug of exactly how dangerous it is.
And you can also see their intention wasn't to kill her. Like, the reaction they had when all this was going on was they were panicking, and like it wasn't it wasn't this malice. They didn't have any malice intent behind it. They were following orders, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was corporate's decision. It was not the scientist's decision, but more the company's decision who was testing the drugs. They wanted the scientific process to be 100% complete, no matter what they had to do.
Yeah. That's totally what I meant. It was just where I was coming from with it was more that it was gonna kill them by the looks of it from the story.
All right, Ben, would you like to get into the climax of the story?
Yeah, so I'll say there's two of them, but this is the first one I have here kind of written down is kind of a subclimax, kind of like building up to it. So there's one of the things that happened was when Jeff originally found out that he wasn't the only one to have slept with these women, there was two other men who also had. So this kind of, I want to say it leads you to believing that Jeff has feelings, even though throughout the story that there's basically no evidence to the contrary, but kind of as the story progresses along and towards the end of it, especially when he's watching Heather kill herself, you kind of, there's a tension in the way it's written, if that makes any sense. So it kind of,
Yeah.
You guys get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And then the final part of it would be when he finally decides to take his own life after given the option to basically do the same thing to Rachel.
Yeah,
And then my big thing for this was because even though he's being controlled and has no emotions of himself, it's still hard for somebody to make that decision, even if it's yours or not. If you have any control over it whatsoever, you're going to take the option that leads to the other people not being hurt over yourself.
And I think that kind of somewhat draws into like the trolley problem. It kind of relates to that a little bit because it's like, would you pull this lever and kill someone you care about, well, in this case, himself, to protect someone else, even if you don't know that person?
And it's this kind of idea of self-sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
you'd rather preserve the lives of others than, again, there's like the self-sacrifice and self-preservation. Depending on the situation, kind of either one can jump in and take over.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it kind of seemed like, I guess, a win-win for him because it was, as the story said, the title of the story is Escape from Spiderhead, right? Which in the beginning, you don't initially take that as meaning dying. You take it as he's going to escape. But it takes on a new meaning when he ends up killing himself. So it was an escape from him and then him saving somebody else.
And there's one more thing about the climax I do want to talk about is that I found the end kind of strange in the way that since they are scientists, it's not like they don't have more people at their disposal. Essentially, what he's doing is resetting the trials, and he's essentially made Heather's death in vain, his own death in vain, and I believe that obviously they're going to continue with the trials, and probably 2 more people will die in the future because of the same trials.
Yeah, do you guys think that they're going to continue with the trials with the other girl that didn't die? Like, bring her into the next trial? You think they'll just, like, write her off sort of thing?
Yeah, they could test it with her and use, like, another one of the men.
Yeah. Do you think they could wipe their memory, or...?
They
Well-
probably have drugs for that.
Probably, to be
probably.
honest.
I wouldn't put it past him for that, but
I think,
I would say because they only tested that because they were testing it with Jeff and Heather, right? They've basically lost 2 pieces of their analysis. They're either going to retry it with Rachel and some other people and add another girl to the mix as well. So either in the end, we're more likely going to lose 3. They're more likely going to kill 3.
Yeah. All right. Any ideas or topics that you guys want to talk about?
so definitely the story follows the topic of death and follows that closely. Love. Those are like the main ones that I can think of.
Kind of the idea of like that trying to controlling people's emotion, which is definitely not out of an unheard of thing. Like
Control, yeah.
Well, that, and it's also like manipulating. Like you could think of it as nowadays you try to manipulate people's emotions, right?
Yeah.
It's more nowadays referred to as gaslighting.
Have you guys ever seen, like, Big Brother? Like, Big Brother Canada, that type of show?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like this is what that is.
His hit.
Well, without the locking them in the room, but, like, basically screwing with people's, like, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, just a way more up version of that.
I feel like it's exactly that. It's just messing with people's perception on life, and they don't really know what's going on.
Well, I feel like that was all. Again, I keep saying this. That was not their intention. It's just a byproduct of their testing.
Mm-hmm.
But don't you think it would have happened before? Like, would this have been the first trial of this? Maybe would this have happened previously, and they didn't expect this result?
Yeah, I mean that's always possible, but maybe they expect them to die. Maybe they
There's a
don't.
lot of
'cause-
questions that I'd
essentially.
love to know the answers to.
but
but
there's
we just
no.
don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
talk to the
like-
author if you want to know about that.
Are these drugs ever going to be released to the public? Like, is their goal just to have a drug where you can just make love with people and just have that feeling of love all the time? Or is Darkenflox going to be like a drug that's available to the public? Like,
I think
I'd
they
hope
mentioned
not.
that they wanted to use the love drugs for like diplomatic relations and solving world problems like that and having world
Oh,
peace.
those would definitely solve world problems. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, they were talking about it to end all wars, basically.
Exactly.
Was the idea of it.
Just get a bunch
They
of them.
said
to-
I think they said at one point in the story that they could just give it to two world enemies, basically world leader enemies, and
Yeah.
fix things up real quick.
How would? Okay.
that's an interesting approach.
It is indeed. I think we're pretty short on time here, so if we want to keep things going.
Yeah. Dennis, you want to take it away with some unique features?
Yeah. So obviously, this takes place in the future, so that opens up a lot of possibilities in terms of story building. So looking at it, this takes place in the future. So looking at the all of these people, like in these testings, have been tried and like punished for some crime, and this is part of their punishment within the criminal justice system. So looking at it like that, this is a very creative, new, interesting way on punishing criminals, aside from putting them into incarceration or into prisons or something like that. Like, I'm sure this would limit the people going into prisons at least by a few dozen or maybe like hundred thousands, right?
Just to kind of jump in, do you think it has any benefit? Like, is it beneficial though? Because like the reason.
I would say the least, if no matter what, I feel like getting people out of prisons are kind of useless. Like, you're left there until your sentence is up. I feel like it's the most least effective thing you could do with a human possible, in my opinion.
But then you also get into the morality of messing with people's emotions and feelings, and then in this case, there's no chance for them to redeem themselves. Basically, they're just there to serve a sentence. There's no restorative approach to it, which
I'd rather screw with people's brains than lock them up in a prison cell. That's
Because
just
that screws with their brains too, to be honest.
We do have to also consider these are all ex-murderers. These are people who have killed people willingly or knowingly.
And these trials are giving them a reduced sentence, so they will, be free sooner. I don't know if that's a good thing necessarily in this case.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily
kill
they
some.
will be free, because it seems like the Darkenflox is just killing them.
Yeah.
They're there they believe that they're gonna walk free at some point, but maybe it's just a cheap and easy way to kill them and
Maybe.
use them for their bodies.
It's
Yeah.
kind of like what I said earlier, where they kind of signed up for, or unknowingly signed up for a death sentence.
Yeah.
I kind of agree with that, but then there's also the what if they do get released? Would you feel comfortable releasing them back into the human population, or will they? Do they know that? I get the assumption that they don't actually know the crimes they've committed anymore because that's somehow been wiped from their memory, or they don't know what other people in the prison have done. But
Yeah.
do you think? Just say hypothetically, this isn't a death sentence. Say they will get released eventually. Why should we let them back out if they're going to do it again?
Well, they erase their memory.
I feel like
Go ahead, Zach. If you
Sorry,
can.
I cut you off. I apologize.
Okay, thank you. I feel like if they're wiping their memory, in theory, if you wipe a person's memory, they won't remember the crime they committed. They won't remember the emotions they had to commit that crime, and hopefully, they wouldn't have the gut feeling or the brain wave pattern or whatever causes a person to kill. I would hope they don't still have that once you wipe their memory. Right.
True. And I guess one thing you could get from this is if they have a drug that makes you feel remorse.
Yeah.
then that would be something beneficial. Where if a person is so far gone to the point where they don't feel remorse for the things they've done anymore, and these trials enable that, then it would make an impact. It would have an impact, and I can
Yeah.
see that being a positive one.
Which could possibly just eliminate prisons altogether. Like once a person commits a crime, wipe their memory, and then make them feel remorse, and then they hopefully release them and they won't do them again. If research would show that, right?
I can see that happening in
Yeah.
the future of
All
this
right,
story.
this conversation took a little bit of a turn. Let's reel back. Any more unique features, Dennis?
Yeah, we have the unique names of the drugs. So for an example, verbulence, TM, if you look up the definition for verbulence, it's the definition to express a person's ideas or emotions. So obviously that would have people that would make people love each other much more than otherwise. Like that word literally means to express emotion or feeling. And also, I think we mentioned it before, but the ending in the title, like escape from Spiderhead, Jeff literally takes his own life, and which could be seen as an escape from the Spiderhead, because he was also thinking about escaping and thinking about how that was impossible.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So the
exactly.
wordplay. Yeah.
All right, Zachary, let's take it away with the theme of this story.
All right, are you guys ready for this one? So basically, the theme that we kind of came up with was we came up with two. One of them was you may be able to control human emotions, but in the end, no human wants to kill another human. And our second one was people will sacrifice the lives of others just to progress their own agendas. Did any of you guys have any themes that you want to input that we didn't put in before?
Just that I think that we should really say like no sane human wants to kill another human, because some people do. Like in your very core, you don't, but some people do have that kind of malice in their hearts, I think.
Yes,
Yeah, that makes
these are all ex-murderers who have killed people for their own reasons. So, yeah. Anyways, Zach, take it away with the POV as well.
All right. So the point of view for Escape from Spiderhead was in first person, where you followed Jeff, and I don't feel like there was anything in the story that affected the understanding of this topic. In general, I felt the story was very easy to read, as you just followed Jeff through his daily life in the Spiderhead, and it never really caused any confusion for me. Yeah.
I will argue that the easy to read part, not necessarily, because in some parts the language used isn't actual proper English. Like when you're reading,
I had to Google verbulence.
well, not only that, but when you're reading spoken word, like when Jeff is talking, it's not, especially when he's not on anything. Basically, he's being dulled out to nothing. It's not proper sentences. So I don't want to say I struggled with it, but it was definitely weird to read something that wasn't proper English.
Yeah, I've had that in like a lot of books I think I've read in the past. I think One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest had kind of writing like that. Like it's writing that sounds normal in speech, but not when you're reading it.
Yeah. That's I had no issue with this. I read a lot of the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings books when I was younger, so maybe that's why I didn't find any confusion in it for myself.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely for me, the ending, like I didn't process that Jeff killed himself. I had to read it like 3 times over just to be like, oh wait, he actually just killed himself at the end, because it happened kind of like very fast.
That part, it kind of was a
Lame
ton of build up for just like a couple sentences of ending, and it did say that he administered the Darkenfloxen himself, but it didn't necessarily say that he killed himself.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any more final thoughts, guys?
I'm all good.
No, I'm good.
All right. Thank you for tuning in for today's special episode of McLaren's Pub Podcast. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe. And remember, use code PUB10 for 10% off all Manscaped products. Have a great night, guys.